Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Fitness Philosopher podcast. As always, it is your host, Adam Fisher. This week, we're going to be talking about exercise sequencing. That's how to arrange your workouts within a workout for maximal results. Now, we're not going to be talking about programming or periodization or, how to structure your workouts long term, but we are going to be talking about how to structure your exercises within the workout itself. Because I get a lot of questions about this. I get a lot of people, they say, oh, should I do cardio first? Or should I do my weight training first? How should I do that? Should I do a warm-up? Should I do a cool-down? Should I stretch? Should I foam roll? How should I do all of that? So this is going to be a very rough outline of sort of a general strength and conditioning template. That does not mean that it is going to work for everyone. That does not mean that it's going to work for all goals. But it is sort of the optimal thing that we've reached after, lots of trial and error over a long period of time. So, to start off, if we had an imaginary graph of your readiness at any given time in a workout, it would look a little something like this. It might start off at about 60 or 70%. That's clean, that's no warm-up, that's just walking straight into the gym and being able to just put up a weight right then. You could maybe do 60, 70% of your maximum. You can't do your best, but you can do something near it. Simply because your body isn't quite warmed up and ready for the task. So that's why people are typically not coming into the gym and skipping a warm-up entirely and going straight for, really heavy work, because that's when you can hurt yourself, you might strain yourself, your body's just not quite ready yet for the exercise. So you do a bit of a warm-up, and what happens is then your body quickly rises to about 100%, maximum readiness for any given task. So that's when you can do your best work. Now, the thing is that as soon as it hits that 100%, as soon as you're warmed up and you start doing work, it's going to start going downhill because your energy systems are going to be tiring out. That means that over time, you're going to be less ready to do, the same level of work over and over. So if I were to take, say, sets of 10 on my bench press with a specific weight, I might warm up and then I might start doing those sets of 10. And I could probably do those sets of 10 for a long time. But after a while, maybe after 5 or 6 sets of that, I would start noticing that I'm getting very tired, assuming that the weight is a appropriately challenging weight. And, maybe 7 or 8 sets, it's kind of, I'm going to be really struggling. 9 or 10 sets, I might not be able to complete it. And if I keep pushing, and if I keep pushing as hard as I can, sooner or later, I'm probably going to hurt myself. And that's, of course, why we don't have you do endless sets of, high-intensity activity all the time. But, so basically you can imagine that after peaking, at 100% of your capacity, of your capability, it starts to go downhill. Now, after a certain point, it does sort of level off. It will sort of plateau in that downward curve. And of course, I'll include a really basic graphical representation of this in the podcast notes. So check that out for sort of, exact picture of what I'm talking about in case it's unclear. But basically, it'll start going downhill, but it will start going downhill a little bit slower and slower over time. That's because your low-level energy systems, your slower-burning energy systems, are constantly providing energy. And, when your body relies on them more and more over a longer period of time, your performance is not going to go downhill as sharply. But you're always most prepared towards the beginning of a workout, but right after you've done your, some sort of warm-up. So, just based on that sort of graph, we typically have a very standard exercise workout structure that works pretty well. So this is divided into a few different parts. The first part is your warm-up. Warm-ups have been validated by scientific study. Warm-ups work. However, what types of warm-up and sort of at what intensity works varies greatly depending on the activity you're doing or that you're trying to train for. And it also varies from person to person. Some people see, huge changes, and some people see minimal changes as a result of warming up. We also know that static stretching, just stretching as most of you would probably call it, is not a very good warm-up. And in fact, there are potentially some negative effects on subsequent performance if you were to do long stretching. In the studies, they were using stretches of a minute at a time, and most people are not doing minute-long stretches. So it's unlikely that you're really, impacting your performance there. However, studies have also shown that when you remove confounding variables, stretching doesn't actually help you warm up at all. And that sort of makes sense. I could do a whole other podcast about stretching itself and kind of explain why. But the thing is that stretching is not a good warm-up in general, unless you're trying to do yoga, for example, in which case, yeah, it would be an appropriate warm-up. But it's not a good warm-up for really much of anything else. Now, warm-up should be kept specific, which means you should be warming up using the same methods you're going to be using in the second part, which is your primary work, which we'll be discussing in a minute, of course. So, for example, if you're running, that means you're going to be doing a light jog. If you're going to be doing some heavy lifting with some heavy compound movements, that means using lighter sets of 1 to 5 while building up to the working weight that you're going to be using. The point here is to be not taxing yourself too hard. So if I, say that I'm going to do a warm-up for my run, and I just go all out for 5 minutes and I burn myself out, sprinting, for example, or not even sprinting, but, just very high-intensity running, that's probably going to tire me out, and it's going to impact my subsequent performance in my primary work, which is what I want to be doing my best at. So you should avoid doing that. You should be looking to do an intermediate level difficulty, intermediate level intensity activity that can help bridge the gap between zero activity and 100% activity, full activity. Non-specific warm-ups can also help as well, but usually not to the same extent. So if I'm about to go squatting, typically you would expect that I want to be doing, lighter squatting my warm-up. But the thing is, what if I said, I want to go running before I go squatting? That's going to help my squat. Well, it might a little bit, because you are getting your legs you're getting your legs moving, you're using those muscles a little bit, but you're not using the same sort of activity, you're not using the same energy pathways. It's unlikely that that's really going to help improve your subsequent squat performance. So, generally, again, you want to stick with as specific of a warm-up as possible. Now, this is also, when you're doing your warm-up, this is also a really good time to work through any nagging movement issues that you may have. So what is that? That is if you're sore from a previous workout, if you have any aches or pains, any weird joints that you sort of have to, warm up a little bit before you can, really get into a good activity. Like, for example, say I'm going to squat on one day. I have, my right knee is sometimes a little bit off. Sometimes, it's a little bit crackly and poppy, and, I just need to do a little bit of leg work before the squat to sort of get that joint moving so that it, just sort of is ready for a full activity like squatting or, tough squatting. And yeah, I could just expect my lighter sets of a squat to do that, but I could also do a little bit of mobility work. I could do a little bit of stretching. Again, not a ton of stretching, but a little bit. I could do some foam rolling on the quads or on the calves. All of that might help. So this is a great time to do a bit of foam rolling, a bit of light movement, some light stretching, whatever, just to sort of grease the joints and get them moving before a big movement. And let's say also, for example, that say I had done a deadlift workout a couple days previous, my low back is very sore, very tight, and that's going to impact my squat, so a bit of foam rolling there would help as well. Now, once you're done with your warm-up, you move into your primary work. Your primary work should be whatever is hardest and most important. That is what you want to be really focusing on. That's what you want to be really getting results in. So if a point, again, to continue on the squat example, let's say that I'm doing a squat day. Well, obviously, the point of my squat day is that I want to be improving my squat. I want to be building muscle in the legs, and I want to be improving my strength in my back squat. So for that means that squat should typically go first, because that's when you have, again, you're at about 100%. You've got your energy levels as high as possible. You don't have any fatigue, so any acute fatigue from working out. So you're ready to do the best that you can. So typically this means typically the kind of work that you'll be doing first for your primary work is typically heavy compound movements done for strength or hypertrophy. That depends, of course, on your exercise goals and your program. If you're training for endurance and this is a cardio day, then you'll lead with that, of course, but that's sort of that's a totally different sort of thing. So typically you'll stick with exercises that are about 1 to 6 reps per set if you're going for strength, or if you're going for hypertrophy, you might be going for something, a little bit, 10 to 12 reps, but still at a high intensity. You're typically going to be focusing on heavy compound movements, focusing on primary movement patterns. So you're training movements, not muscles. That includes stuff like your deadlift, your squat, your bench press, your overhead press, your row, your pull-up or your pull-down, your clean, your jerk, your snatch, Or if you're training something like calisthenics, your body weight movements, ring work, handstands, all that sorts of stuff. Again, this is what you want to be putting the most effort into, and this should be the most taxing, and this should be what you're going to be getting the most out of. So your primary work is typically only maybe 1 or 2 things per workout, or just a very few, because again, they're very taxing, they're very challenging, you're going to be doing it at a high intensity. This is what you're really pushing to improve week to week. After you're done with your primary work, you're going to be going into assistance work, or second, people might call it secondary work. So that's the third part of your workout. Secondary work should be done to elicit additional hypertrophic or endurance gains, but typically not strength, because again, strength is very tough, and that's typically what you would work on in your primary work. So if you're looking to build hypertrophy or endurance in specific areas, this is what you're going to be focusing on. So it's going to correspondingly be lower intensity. You might see some stuff that's, again, a little more up around the strength work range, around 6 reps or so, but you're typically going to be working around the 10 to 12 rep range, or even higher than that, 20, 25, 30 reps for certain movements. So assistance work can mean a lot of things. You could be doing the same primary work movements, but at a lighter intensity to elicit additional volume. So that might mean that if I did a bench press for say, sets of 5 for my strength, and I still need to be building a bit of muscle in my chest so that I can improve my bench press, then I'll be doing sets of 10 to 12 with that same bench press, but again at a lighter weight. You can also do different variations on primary movements. So let's say that obviously my flat bench press as a powerlifter is what I want to focus on, but I could also do an incline bench press instead, because that gives you a slightly different variation, helps you train slightly different muscles, slightly different movement patterns. So I might do that as an assistance movement, again in the 10 to 12 rep range, as an assistance work to my flat bench press. You could also be doing stuff to target weak points in your physique or sticking points in your strength movements. So let's say that I feel that I have really bad triceps, and as a result my bench press is I'm having difficulty on the top portion of my bench press, the lockout. So I might be working a lot on my triceps, in this phase. Doing a lot of work for my triceps, because if I build up my triceps a little bit, that'll help improve my bench press. And again, you could just be doing isolation work for smaller muscle groups just to get hypertrophy in those areas. So say you're a bodybuilder and you're unsatisfied with how big your calves are or how big your biceps are. You might just be doing some work to just to build those up a little bit. Again, you're sort of training not motions as much, but you're training muscles a little bit more. Again, just to build up a little bit of size. Now, because this is assistance work, these exercises are less important, and as a result, there's a bit more fluidity here. You could change out certain exercises for other exercises, and it wouldn't impact your training as much. So let's say, for example, again with the example of the bench press, let's say I'm doing a bench press day. I might also decide that I want to be working on my biceps a little bit, building up my biceps a little bit for my assistance work. So let's say I'm doing just a standard dumbbell bicep curl, and then let's say that the next time I do this same workout, I switch that bicep curl out for a hammer curl, or I switch that out for a barbell loaded hammer curl, or I switch that out for a cable loaded hammer curl. Well, they're all training the same muscle. They're all doing basically the same thing, because again, the movement here isn't important. We're just trying to train that muscle itself. So there is a little bit of room there for me to switch that around. But if, for example, I was really trying to improve my incline bench press at the same time as my flat bench press, I might not want to trade that one out, simply because, again, that one is more of a movement and less of a muscle-focused isolation exercise. So there is some room with your assistance work to really switch stuff out, and some of these exercises are less important in terms of how exactly they're done. However, one word of caution is that if you're switching stuff out a lot, it can be really hard to track your progress. So if I was doing curls with dumbbells, and then I was doing curls with the cable machine, if I am constantly switching back and forth between those two week to week, I can't really tell if I'm really getting better at my dumbbell bicep curl or my cable bicep curl, because I'm not able to track volume as clearly between the two. Whereas if I'm doing the same dumbbell bicep curl week after week, I can add 1 rep or 2 reps or 3 reps here and there, and I can see continued progress with the same movement over time, again, so long as I'm tracking it. So it is a good idea to maintain a certain level of consistency with your assistance work, but again, there's a little bit more room for switching stuff out and, just sort of having fun a little bit. The other thing with assistance work is that since it is just that, it's assistance work, it's designed to cover weak points, it's designed to sort of cover these little areas that we may have issues with rather than being sort of the bulk of the work. So it's possible sometimes to skip your assistance exercises. That doesn't mean that it should be done regularly, because if you do it a lot, you're going to start seeing that you're not reaching your goals. But the point here is that it is less important. So every now and then, maybe you have a bad day at the gym, you're not feeling as strong as you usually are, maybe you have an upset stomach, or you're just kind of feeling woozy and tired. This would be the stuff to cut out a little bit more than the primary strength work or the primary hypertrophy work, because that's going to be where you get most of your results from. So that's going to conclude the assistance work section. After that, there is another phase that you can do. This is optional. This is not necessary, but this is where you can do metabolic work. So that's endurance type work. That's cardio type work. And there's all kinds of ways you can do that. You can do that in circuits. You can do that with intervals. You can do that with stuff like sled work, dragging or pushing a sled. You can do running. You can do cycling. You can do rowing for short durations, typically 10 to 20 minutes, rather than like a full long run, for example. You can do CrossFit WODs. You can do rep challenges, like, okay, I'm going to see, what weight I can do 100 squats at, etc. It doesn't matter. The point here is to get some sweat going and, conditioning, to get your conditioning in. The reason that we put your cardio after your weight training is, again, just sort of going along with that energy systems thing. If you have, your most energy at 100% and you blow all of that energy on cardio and then you try and do your strength work, well, it's not going to work. On the other hand, because your cardiovascular system tends to rely more on sort of these slow-burning energy systems, what you're going to see is that cardio doesn't suffer as much from you being tired out as does strength work, as does hypertrophy work. So you can do your conditioning work, your metabolic work, at the end of the workout, and it's not going to be impacted as much versus if you reverse the two. So that's why we tend to put cardio at the end of a mixed strength training and cardiovascular workout. So of course this is not of course applicable if you are training for endurance. So if you are running and you just did a long run instead. So of course, again, we'll talk about that in a little bit, how this model can get shaken up a lot. Now, part 5 is just your cooldown. The cooldown is not as important or necessary, especially if your metabolic work is just a bit of light cardio. But the cooldown is a good time, again, to get in some basic movement practice, to do a bit of foam rolling. This is where you might want to do some longer stretching. This just sort of, again, helps you transition to non-activity a little bit easier and just helps your recovery a little bit as well. So the cool down is just sort of, you can do some kind of light work, you could do something pretty easy, you could do a little bit of cardio, whatever, it doesn't matter. But again, just do something. That's the main thing. So that's kind of the general structure of a strength and conditioning workout. Now, there are some other general rules. Again, this is not a perfect system. This is just a general template that most people work from in some form or another. This tends to be the most sort of generally applicable model. Now, again, going back to the example of the runner, what is a runner going to do? Because obviously they're not going to be doing a ton of strength work all the time. Well, they might do days where they're just doing a lot of running, and so they just do running. They don't have to follow this template at all. Or they might do days when they do a bunch of running, and then at the end they're doing some assistance work. They're skipping the primary work because they're not doing any strength. Or they might do days that are just dedicated to a bit of strength training, because it does help improve, particularly with runners and endurance athletes, your speed a little bit, but also your resistance to injury over time. So yeah, maybe once or twice a week, a runner might do a traditional strength and conditioning type workout where they start off with some strength stuff, they do some hypertrophy stuff for assistance, and then they do some endurance work, and then they're done. But that structure, again, only applies when you're generally including these strength movements with your important compound primary movements. In general, what we're doing when we're structuring this program is we're moving from high-intensity, high-skill movements down to lower-intensity, lower-skill movements over time. That's what I'm saying. Again, you're starting off with the hardest stuff and you're moving on to the easier stuff within the workout. However, you can still do high-skill movements later on in the workout at a lower intensity. That's like, for example, if you're doing a circuit at the end of your workout where you do like some really light cleans, or you're doing some box jumps, or you're doing something like that. That's fine, because you're doing it at a lower intensity, so it's not as taxing in terms of just those energy systems. It's generally best, if possible, and this isn't always possible because depending on who you are, your training style might vary. It's generally best, if possible, to keep your exercises in the same order from week to week if you're doing a structured program. So let me give you 2 examples. First, let's say it's a leg day and I'm doing squats. So regardless, I'm going to be starting off with squats. But let's say in general I'm used to doing squats and then jumps and then a leg press. So I'm doing a strength movement, that's the squat. I'm doing an explosive power movement, that's the jump. And then I'm just doing a good old hypertrophy movement, that's your leg press. So say I'm doing that for a few weeks. That's like what my squat day looks like. Then say I switch it around. So I'm still doing the squat first, but then I'm doing the leg press next, and then I'm doing the jumps third. How does that change things? Well, since I'm doing the leg press before the jumps instead of after the jumps, that means that my leg presses, I'm going to be doing the leg press earlier in the workout. I'm going to be more ready. I'm going to have more energy. My muscles aren't going to be as fatigued. So, I'm going to be able to do better at the leg press than I normally was when it was the third exercise in the chain. And of course, that also means that the jumps is the third exercise in the chain rather than the second. That means that I'm going to be a little bit more tired out, and thus I'm not going to be able to do quite as well. And again, this isn't necessarily a terrible issue, but it is a problem in terms of seeing progress, because if I'm switching, my exercises up every time I'm doing the workout, even if I'm doing the same exercises, it's going to be hard to tell if I'm improving or not. It's going to be hard to sort of, maintain steady progress because I'm going to be switching things all over. My body's not going to be used, my energy levels are not going to be consistent, so my body's not going to be used to it as much. And again, that can make it can obscure your progress and make it hard to see results. And again, sort of the general structure of the workout, it's typically best to do your strength work before your endurance work. You're starting on strength or hypertrophy, you're then doing hypertrophy or endurance, and then you're moving on to endurance after that. Endurance, or again, a little bit of hypertrophy at the end. That is the general best structure, but again, that can change a lot. CrossFit athletes, may need to do a lot of movement practice alongside their strength work. You have a body weight or calisthenics exerciser who focuses on doing lots of high rep activities, so they're going to start off doing a lot of high rep activities in the beginning of the workout, practicing those movements, and then they're just going to move on after that to less intense isolation or assistance exercises afterwards. You might have a pure strength athlete who doesn't like to do cardio at all. And I do believe that strength athletes should do cardio. Of course, they may wish to minimize or modify the cardio they're doing in order to prevent negative conflicts. So they may not even be doing it at the end of the workout. They may be doing it in a separate workout entirely. It's also possible to structure exercises so that you're doing 2 workouts within a day. And that's actually a really good thing because it gives your body more time to recover, and that means that you can be sort of fresh at 2 different points within the workout. So if you imagine, if I were to take this standard structure and I had, it's warm-up, primary work, assistance work, metabolic work, cooldown. Now let's say I split it up. So I do a morning workout, I warm up, I do my primary work, I do some of my assistance work, but not all of it, and then I do a cooldown and then I leave. I come back later in the day, I warm up, I do the rest of my assistance work, I do my metabolic work, I do my cooldown, and I leave. What's different in the scenario where I'm doing 2 workouts rather than 1? Well, in that scenario, I've had more time to rest in between the first half of the workout and the second half of the workout, which means that I'm fresh, or nearly fresh at the very least. My recovery isn't going to be complete, but it's going to be pretty high for the rest of my assistance work, which means I'm getting better results out of that because I'm able to push myself harder than I would have been able to if I was just doing it in 1 workout. Now, the only issue with doing 2 workouts per day, of course, is that it's difficult. Not everyone really has the time to go into the gym twice a day, or maybe they have stuff for themselves at home, but even then, it's tough to do, to fit multiple workouts in per day. And of course, there's probably diminishing returns on that as well. So if I were to propose some crazy guys doing 3 or 4 or 5 workouts a day, well, again, you're probably seeing better results from that. You're probably more and more rested in between, each segment of the workout that you're doing. But the problem, again, is that that's taking up more and more of your time per day. And if you're a professional athlete who just does that all day, like a Bulgarian-style athlete, that's sort of the premise behind that, the Bulgarian weightlifters, that is, that can absolutely work. But again, it's pushing it more and more past the level of sort of recreational athletics. It's pushing it more into the professional and less into the working out, which is what most people are doing. Most people are just coming into the gym and working out, so they don't really need to worry about doing multiple workouts per day. You can still get a really great workout in in a pretty, and as long as you move through it pretty quickly and you're not just totally exhausted doing a long 2 or 3 hour long workout, you can get a great workout in a short period of time, and you probably don't need to do a second workout per day. But that is a possibility, and that does allow you to switch it up, and you could even do 2 mini versions of this 5-part cycle rather than splitting that 5 parts up into 2 workouts. You could just repeat it twice. There's lots of ways you can do it. You can do your strength work in the morning, and you can do your endurance work in the evening, and that also helps sort of reduce or minimize interference effects as well. But again, it is a more extreme solution to this issue of how to structure the workout, and I absolutely do not recommend it for everyone. So that again is sort of that's the general principles behind exercise sequencing, just for maximal results. Again, you're moving typically from high strength, high skill movements to lower, endurance or hypertrophy movements, more isolation exercises, fewer compound exercises, and of course you're trying to keep a relatively stable workout from week to week. You're not trying to make huge changes in your program every time. And that enables you to see progress. That enables you to sort of maximize your energy systems and get the most out of your body in the workout. And it allows you to just continue to see good results over time. So that is this week's podcast. Next week, we are going to be focusing on periodization. So that's not how we are structuring exercise within the workout, but that is how we are structuring workouts in sequence over time in order to get the best results, again, in order to continue seeing results over time. So I hope this has been helpful. This has been the 7th podcast, Exercise Sequencing for Maximal Results. All right, have a good one.
Hey everyone, Adam here again. I'd like to announce that I'm very happy to have launched my new Patreon service with lots of just amazing stuff, amazing content for everyone out there. So if you're interested in supporting the show, just go ahead and reach out to patreon.com/gains, that is Gains, patreon.com/gains. Basically, I've got all sorts of rewards out there. You can get copies of, a free program, or not free, but just $1. So it might as well be free, right? I'm sure you can spare $1. You spend that on like a can of soda. So for $1, you can get a copy of a 12-week training program that you can use to sort of kickstart your fitness journey. For $10, you can get a copy of my first book, The Uplift Method. We've also got T-shirts. We have a group coaching program in which you get semi-standardized programs, as well as access to a community on Facebook that you can interact with just to help you with your fitness goals. And for $100, we offer totally personalized one-on-one coaching. So if you are interested in, or if you want to support the show, please give to us on Patreon, and we give back to you with the best content that we can, just so that you can see the best results and so that you can get everything out of fitness that you've always hoped for. So as always, it's great to talk to everyone. It's great to have the chance to do and run this podcast. So please don't hesitate to check it out. Patreon.com/gains, and any little bit helps. Every single dollar helps me buy more Taco Bell. It helps me talk about lifting weights. It helps me talk about how you shouldn't be afraid to be yourself and to live in your body and have fun with fitness. So I love you guys all, and I will talk to you again soon.